Hi, and thank you for joining me for another short talk. Today we have my friend on the phone with us, and we thought we'd start a little series, dialoguing. There isn't much talk or free talk in Judaism nowadays. For some reason, most Jews never meet anyone who think differently than they do. So I'm in the business of telling people that what's good for me is good for them, which is why I think I've been able to package Judaism in such a way that I can hand it over to someone else and expect them to remain Jewish and not have so many unanswered questions, which I believe that Judaism nowadays is the religion that its members know the least of how it functions. And I think that's a sad thing. So let me hand it over to here. What's up? How's it going?
Going great. I believe we should give the audience a little background on some of my opinions. I share many of Ash's opinion, I would say 80 to 90%. We do disagree on some percentage of things which will be apparent during this dialogue. And the main focus that I wanted to have with the questions I'm going to ask Rabbi Asher this evening is regarding the things that I feel that sometimes don't sit well with everyone either coming into Judaism or already established in normative Judaism. Many people who are coming into Judaism or people who grew up Jewish have a mystical notion about the angels, life after death, how God will react to certain actions in life. What is your position on God's involvement in day-to-day life?
In this area, what do you see problematic, or what do you think doesn't sit well with people in terms of a position that I hold?
I think the biggest thing is not necessarily the midrash itself, but rejecting a group of people or information that's handed to you from a group of people, i.e. the rabbis that have written and spoke midrash, kind of leaves people in the air as far as the direction of where they're going to go religiously, because some of the driving points are not necessarily natural.
Reject is a broad term. Now, to accept something as absolute and objective is a big difference than to say that it can help us see things in a different manner, or it cannot. It's up to us to see at the end in retrospect.
In this we agree 100%. It could definitely help us. It's not necessarily law,
but it could also hurt us, right? Because it's not, unless you consider it absolutely true, objectively true. In other words, you'd be saying that it's divinely inspired. So even if it seems like it's hurting us, it's really going to help us in the long run, because that's the way we justify things that are divinely inspired, right?
Not necessarily, but what I'm trying to say is that many of these midrashim, whether they're true or not, are a great rule of thumb to live your life by. And I think to reject the wisdom...
No, but I'm not rejecting it. Why are you rejecting the possibility that some of them may actually hurt more than help?
To be honest, out of reverence to the rabbis. I mean, I believe these people to have integrity and to be honorable, not just because they're honorable religious figures, but because if you start questioning the leaders of the faith, eventually you're going to have to start questioning Moshe Rabbeinu as well. That's how I feel personally.
I understand the notion of integrity here, right? But the way I understand
and I assume that these people have more integrity and higher principles and higher moral foundation than I do.
Okay.
Immediately I do. Do you feel that same way?
I'm not going to say that about every rabbi who happened to have been published.
No, but at least some. At least the Rishonim and Chazal.
Well, I mean, it depends. Depends on what area. Okay? I mean, we see Chazal behaving disgustingly in many areas. I mean, I made a whole video about slavery in Judaism. There was an actual sage. This Tana would choke his slaves with a chain. So then as they would bathe themselves, as they were coming out of the water, they wouldn't say that they're immersing for the sake of conversion. No, there's a lot of things in there like that. The whole notion of black skin being a curse. I mean, there's a lot of things in the Talmud.
But let's grab one. Let's grab one in particular. Let's grab two. Rashi and the Rambam. Wouldn't you just admit, just to start off with, both of them have midrashim that they go by. So wouldn't you say that Rashi and the Rambam have higher moral foundation, have higher integrity, and have higher scholarship than both you and I?
Scholarship and being ethical or moral
have
nothing to do with each
independent. And no, I know they don't, but answer them individually.
You know, so why?
So start by morality.
First of all,
are they more moral than you and I?
In terms of Rishonim being moral or not moral, We don't know.
No, I'm talking about these two in particular.
Right. Who knows? Honestly, in terms of their personal life, which is what you're asking me, who knows how these individuals were alone? These guys are elevated in Judaism for their knowledge of Torah, but knowledge of Torah doesn't mean that you're necessarily ethical. Now, I'm not saying...
They need to be ethical and moral. If not, how do we trust what's being transmitted? The only reason why we hold the Torah dear is because we trust that it's given from Hashem, because we trust Moshe Rabbeinu to be an honorable individual and a moral individual with integrity that will not lie to us. That's why the children of Israel told them, you go up and bring us the information. We don't want to hear it anymore.
There's a big distinction made even by the Rambam with the role Moses plays and everyone else plays in Judaism. In other words, by even questioning the prophecy of Moses, you're pulling the rug from under your feet. Okay? Just so that area is taboo. I'm just saying. We can't say. Wait, hold on. We can't say that because we accepted Moses, we might as well accept Muhammad and Joseph Smith as well.
No. You know, different. But because there's no lineage. There's no lineage of education
your train of thinking here. I mean, it's the exact same thing. When you're telling me,
the point of transmission of information. Right. He does. No, he doesn't. He?
No, he doesn't.
He doesn't.
The Rambam does. I mean, the Rambam does.
The Rambam does, but not Rashi.
Right.
Okay, but let's. Okay.
Also, he could have lied about that. These guys are not important to us because of who they claim to be. They're important to us because of the work.
My question is, if you're questioning their integrity, that they will lie about this, right?
I'm not questioning.
Then we also need to question Moses, and let me explain to you why. In my opinion, let me explain to you why. Because if Moses is 100% of the maximum achievable by humans, right? Mm-hmm. Then these other guys should be 95%. You know what I mean? It has to be. There has to be a standard of trust you could have.
With that form of thinking, what would stop you from accepting prophets today?
Because they don't follow the lineage of education that I believe from Moses.
Yeah, you believe that in faith.
Okay. Here's what I believe. Here's what I believe. As per my limited education, I believe in the list of lineage of education. You know, teacher to student, that the Rambam describes in the introduction to his Mishnah, all the way from Moshe to Yehuda Hanasi. And that's it. And the Rambam tells us this is what we have.
Yeah, we don't need the Rambam to tell us that. That's the thing. I mean, even if the Rambam didn't mention that, it appears in Perkei Avot in the Mishnah. In other words, the Rambam is only important to us because he codified Jewish law. That's it. And we don't care about
that's why I cannot accept any prophet afterward. Because the sages told us that this is the lineage we have of all the information we have.
It's not an issue of integrity. It's an issue of him being a scholar.
Well, if he
produces a good work, then
but if you could be scholar, you could have the information and lie about it, basically. So I have to assign integrity in order for me to believe the information he has.
No, the Mishnah Torah could be compared to Mishnaic literature. I mean, if the Rambam just made stuff up, then that would be something that would be attributed to him. Well, that's not the way the Mishnah Torah works. Now, there are a few things that
he's grabbing stuff from everybody else.
You know, so it's verifiable.
What's not to say that everybody else is lying. You get what I'm saying? So
I mean,
what I'm saying is, if we don't assign truth of transmission, then all of it is questionable, all the way back to Moshe Rabbeinu.
You're failing to make a huge distinction between the prophecy of Moses, which can't even be mentioned. The foundation of our faith is that God spoke to Moses. This is not questioned. If it gets questioned, what you end up with is Christianity. What you end up with is Islam. Because they'll say, oh, well, you accept Moses, you believe that in faith, so you might as well believe everything else in faith. That's why it's dangerous what you're doing. The Rambam,
I'm not the one doing that. I'm not the one doing that.
Great to us because of his integrity or his dignity or his personal life. We don't really care about any of that stuff. He made the law that already existed accessible to the common man, but it was all verifiable. But his personal life doesn't really matter. I don't see your point. I mean, it sounds very dangerous.
My point is, when it comes to Midrashim, we're not speaking specifically about the halacha he quoted from the other sources. We're talking about the supernatural stuff.
To accept people's personal statements as true because of who they are.
Well, that's what I'm saying. They're just not regular people. You're saying can't pull the rug from Moses, and that's the opposite of what I'm doing. I'm not trying to pull the rug of Judaism.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Just like we accept Moses.
So I'm saying if Moses is 100%, I believe Hazal and the Rishonim to be somewhere around 90 plus.
All right.
That's my opinion.
That's for sure your opinion, because it's not Judaism's opinion. The Torah does not endorse that line of thinking. From Genesis all the way to Deuteronomy, it seems that Moses is the man. Anything after Moses is considered extra. I believe in the authority of the rabbis to establish law, to build fences, but all their edicts and decrees are considered rabbinic. Seems like you're elevating them more than they ever elevated themselves. I mean,
well, because some of them edicts and decrees come from mystical beliefs, and this is what the topic is about. This is what we're speaking about.
From mystical beliefs, but they were voted on in a court setting.
Correct.
So that's why we have to keep them, and not because the mystical source is true.
And I'm not here a mystic or trying to promote mysticism in any way, but I'm just saying some type of mysticism, some type of supernatural belief form the basis of the law that exists today. So therefore, is it some of it justifiable, or is it some of it true?
The Torah, in this discussion, has to be untouchable. You can't say, well, like we accept the Torah, like we should accept the tales of a rabbi who lived 100 years ago. That's a given.
And I'm not saying that necessarily. I'm saying that the midrashic proofs that they're using has some type of validity to the point that they will use it to make decisions.
These guys were chosen not because they were mystically inclined, but because they were the scholars of Israel. I mean, they knew the actual law. I mean,
and I'm not disagreeing with you on this.
I just think that if by definition, just because they exist, they deserve some sort of veneration. That sounds like completely antithetical to Torah. Now,
well, not veneration, but like
Torah, only for Moses, right? Why? An assumption that they know what. Well, here's what it comes down to. If I could just summarize it in one sentence, I assume they're more correct than I am immediately. I will put it above my own understanding. That's something different. Thinking that someone, because they're knowledgeable, may be smarter than you, but does that mean that anything they say is automatically true?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying if there is a contradiction between my understanding and their understanding, I would, before dismissing their understanding, I would assume them to be right before I conjured up something different.
Oh, well, that's different. I mean, I think the proper action to take is to research their point of view, and if for some reason they're not smart enough to explain it to you on how they came to it, then I don't find that in any way virtuous. To the point that they
I'm trying to be virtuous. I'm trying to be accurate.
Because of who I am and not because of the proof that I'm bringing. I mean, this is not the Jewish way. I mean, it seems like the veneration of man. It's not
a veneration of man in the sense that, okay, if you let's say you're some high level physics professor and you discovered a bunch of stuff that, say, couldn't be discovered by anybody else, right? And then you had one idea that was kind of quacky. Everyone wouldn't just go ahead and consider your idea quacky right away, given the fact that you had such a reputation of covering so much stuff prior to that.
I think you're referring to gravitas, like weight of someone's statement. But
exactly
that
what I'm speaking about.
I mean, that has to be accompanied always with examples or proofs. To say, believe me because of who I am. I quoted the verse the other day that we're not allowed to show favoritism in judgment. It could open the door to many other things. I mean, this is why the Zohar is accepted today. And the only reason the Zohar is accepted today is because the vast majority of Kabbalists think like you do. They're thinking like, you know what? We probably wouldn't have accepted this book, but it says it's written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And you know what? If following Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is wrong, I don't want to be right. I mean, it just sounds ridiculous. Instead of saying, no, let's research it. Let's see if it's sound. I mean, what if some rich guy is in front of you and you're a judge and there's a poor guy next to him? Like, why not saying, well, this guy works hard, this other guy doesn't, so I'm automatically going to assume that this rich guy is correct.
Yeah.
It's very dangerous. Judaism, what it can't do is destroy itself. And this, with everyone sticking their hands in the cookie jar, the Zohar started off as a book with maybe a few dozen pages, and now it's the size of the Talmud itself, right? Because people kept on trying to get their ideas validated with the pen of divine inspiration, saying that all these books were written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And they're doing the same thing with the Vilna Gaon. There's this book called Kol HaTor, that appeared during the Six-Day War, and suddenly they're saying, because they wanted to get those ideas into Judaism, they said this book was written by the Vilna Gaon. And of course, people accept it on that basis. You don't see that that's dangerous?
I definitely see your concern there. But I didn't take it that far. I wasn't trying to go ahead and fight the legitimacy of the Zohar or anything like that. I was more trying to
Nowadays,
validate some of the midrashim that the Rambam and the Rashi use.
right.
Even
They could help. I mean, I'm not saying that they're bad by definition. I'm just saying they could help, but you also have to acknowledge that they might also hurt at the same time. You would say, no, they can't hurt. I mean, that's already
I never said they don't hurt. My initial probe to the question was, couldn't any of it be real and good? I mean, I just see somebody like Rashi quoting the Midrash, right? And saying, oh, go here to find out what the Midrash says. You know, this is such a rational person, such a,
I think Art Scroll,
scholarly like commentator. If it's good enough for him, it should be good enough for me. That doesn't have any weight in your heart, the fact that he would go ahead and quote something like that?
If he held from some Mishnaic opinion, if he's keeping a halakha a certain way versus a different way, out of the respect that I have for that individual, I could say, you know what, I'm going to do it that way.
That's exactly the point I was making. I wasn't going
but
so
that has
far
nothing to do with Midrashim.
Well, I mean, he quotes Midrashim.
All of Rashi's commentary are pretty much Midrashim gathered from all different places, but that doesn't make anything he says any more true. Now, some Midrashim are beautiful, but we have to admit, and we can't be scared to say, that some are a bit silly, right? And for some reason, that's viewed as...
Well, he obviously didn't believe him to be silly.
So? I mean,
that's Rashi. I mean, to me, that's where it goes.
I mean,
that's the line. So we agree. Okay, wait a second. First, we went too far as going Zohar and all that stuff. That could be pushing it, right? So then we cut back and we say, how about just the simple midrashim quoted by Rashi? And I said, if it's good enough for Rashi, it's good enough for me.
Okay, basically. You can say that for yourself.
Because we agreed prior to that.
But
we agreed that you'll give weight to his work. We agreed that you'll give weight to
it's fine, you can say that on a personal level, but you shouldn't be appalled if someone says, you know what, I think that midrash is silly. I mean,
I'm not appalled if anybody tells me that anything else is silly. I mean,
the rabbis do it to themselves all the time. I mean, if the Rambam held a certain way and Rashi held another way, I mean, why is it if you don't follow Rashi, you automatically think you're smarter than him? Instead of saying, if the Rambam held like this, there is a misconception nowadays called Yeridat HaDorot. I mean, this notion that the closer you are to Sinai, the more intrinsically holy you are in some way. I mean, this is nonsense, and this is why people venerate these rabbis to such an extent that, you know what, the Judaism that we're going to end up with is not going to resemble what we started out with, and that's how it is nowadays. I mean, people quote Likutei Moharan, and they'll say, Torah says. I mean, honestly, there has to be checks and balances.
Well, the instruction says it could be that Torah doesn't necessarily has to be the,
right. Yeah, but that's not
the Torah of Hashem. It could
that's not what
the Torah of the rabbi.
I mean, perhaps on a different planet, but people know. Like if a rabbi says, Torah says, I mean the Torah from Moses, right? I mean, this is.
Clearly, people have read the Torah and know that the Torah does not say that. I don't think people are that naive. And if they are, then these are not the people we're talking about right now.
That's the vast majority of Jews. Come on, I mean, every Lubavitcher that will believe.
I mean, if you don't have read the simple narrative of the Torah, like what type of a religious
Kabbalists nowadays believe that everything that rabbis even teach today was given to Moses on Mount Sinai. Okay, I mean, this is a core belief of theirs. This is why they don't even try to justify their actions or statements. They're like, it doesn't matter. We speak for God. And it's really dangerous. You see, I'm not against Midrashim, and it comes out that way for some reason, just because I try to run the point home to many people, just so they could start to think clearly that, hey, you know what? There's text that you don't mess with, which is the foundation of our belief system, which is the 5 books of Moses, and even the Mishnah, and that would include the explanations of the Mishnah by the Amoraim. But if you don't draw the line and say, you know what? This ends Judaism and everything else is there just to amplify it, then you're going to change the religion. And Judaism is ultimately not going to be Judaism anymore. And in terms of the Zohar, I have no problem in viewing the Zohar just like a Medrash. Fine. No, but it's called the Zohar HaKadosh, right? I mean, this is the holy Zohar. Come on, man. We have to.
I found certain wisdom in mystical understandings. Like, for example, something that justified to me a lot, something I always had a problem was how Hashem seemed to take away the free will from Pharaoh, and also how the questionable actions of some world leaders seem to be against their character, whether good or bad. And there's a Kabbalistic notion that leaders don't necessarily have 100% free will.
All right.
So to be unjustified, I think that's great wisdom,
Right,
man.
to you. On the devotional level, anyone could elevate any measures to whatever level they want, but they can't say that, you know what, you're wrong here for not considering this as special as I think it is. I mean, I have no problem. I mean, there's many people who create halachot for themselves, and you could do that. You could prohibit something for yourself.
Yeah.
But that's not what's happening here. You're basically saying, if you don't see what I see, then you're wrong.
I've not said that once. I'm trying to see where.
Then what are we discussing then?
What we're discussing is, I want you to put in context, where do these things fit? And I think you have. I think you said that they work at a personal devotional level. Devotional level.